and we are live on the PHU Dynasty podcast. This is episode 64. We're here for the 2024 rookie draft review. Had our big event of the year just a little while ago, and lots of great players this year to talk about. We have two special guests. We have our normal co-host, Sean O'Shea. He's
Hello.
here to rip some draft knowledge to y'all, and then we also have Lionheads GM Vince Patrignani. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Hello.
All right, so without further ado, we're just going to kick this right off. We're going to start right up at the top. We're going to start with the first round. We're going to go all the way to the fourth round, talk about every single pick. We're going to maybe compare our rankings a little bit and talk about some of these guys and how they fit their dynasty rosters currently. So let's get started at the top with probably the least interesting pick, because we knew it was going to be the pick for so long. Marvin Harrison to the Bombers for Justin Sr. Sean, was there any doubt in your mind that this was going to be the case, or did you have any Malik Neighbors thoughts here at one?
For me, no. This is probably the most anticlimactic pick I think we've had in a while. I mean, he's just such a safe option with such a high floor that you can't. I don't know. I would find it so difficult to go any other way.
Definitely in a class like this with such weak running backs, there was really nobody who could even usurp him. It was pretty clear, number one, him. And although Neighbors, I think, is definitely like the clear two, I think the landing spot difference kind of set the one apart from the two here.
Yeah,
And made it
Kyler
easy
Murray
for
is
Justin.
nice. Very easy for Justin, who adds Harrison to an already pretty good wide receiver room. He's going to be paired up with Jamar Chase there. Two great young players. I mean, Harrison kind of feels like a little bit beefier version of AJ Green to me when I watch him on tape. I'm very excited to see how he does in his rookie year, because I truly believe he's one of the most NFL ready receivers we've seen in quite some time. I'd be shocked if he didn't have 1,000 yards. I know we were talking about it the other night. I think his line was 1,100 or something like that, or 1050.
1075, I think, or 1035, somewhere in that range. That's an easy over for me. Like I find it hard for myself to not stat him at least like 1,200 and 8 touchdowns. Me personally.
Yeah, I can't imagine him getting anything less than 1,000. He's going to be the number one guy. He only has Michael Wilson to really compete with at this point, and the great Greg Dortch in the slot. So I think he's going to get easily 120 targets and be the guy as long as he stays healthy. Vince, let's talk about this from a Bombers perspective. Where does this this kind of caliber player, does this move the needle for the Bombers at all for you as far as power rankings or moving forward? How do you feel about this for the Bombers?
No, I mean, this was a stock. Like, we all knew this pick was kind of etched in stone, probably since, one of the last couple weeks of the season. So this pick didn't really shock me or move the needle, because it was just like, oh, he's going to add to his already good wide receiving core. So it didn't really, it's a great long-term building piece, and it's going to be someone who's always going to probably be in the top 3 for wide receiver for the next 5 to 10 years. But there are core problems with this team that if they're not addressed, they're just really going to be tough to be a playoff team this year with like the running back situation.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we get further into the draft as well. Let's go to number 2. Also, kind of a chalky pick here. All things considered, with Malik Neighbors going to the Kentucky Elk. Neighbors lands with the New York Giants, a team that really needed somebody with some juice and actual playmaking ability that can bail out Daniel Jones or Drew Lock or whoever the hell is playing for them now. I'm pretty excited for Neighbors. I really think there was some weight to the discussion of him maybe being the number 1 receiver. Obviously, the safeness of Marvin is too hard to pass up, though. But I feel like Neighbors might even have higher upside, given his athletic talent and the way he can create separation. Do you guys feel that he was the clear number 2 in maybe a 1A, 1B situation? Sean, let's start with you.
I actually had him 3.
Sean's a Rome guy.
I am a Rome guy. I think Neighbors has the widest spectrum of outcomes out of the 3 of them, and I usually like a little bit of a safer high floor. And I think landing spot for me, I kind of like, even though year 1 isn't amazing with the number of receivers they've got, he's got Caleb Williams for the foreseeable future. So And I don't think any of us know who the quarterback in 2025 is going to be for the Giants at this point. So I like Rome just a little bit more.
Vince,
Um,
what do you think?
I haven't given the Rome versus Neighbors too much thought, because I think both of them, their situations have their warts. So the context is you kind of just stick with whatever the pre-draft consensus was, which was Neighbors. So I think this was the right pick. And I think it was kind of like Justin's. Like, it's the pick you had to make in this situation. Even if you wanted or needed something else, it would have been an AJ Barner to do anything else. It would just would not make sense. If you know, you know. But as far as, like, a range of outcomes, I think he has a huge, massive ceiling. But I think it's unfair to say that about someone like Marvin Harrison, is 6'3" plus, got the weight, got the pedigree, got the college production, got the landing spot, draft capital, better even than Neighbors, who also has phenomenal draft capital. But it's not a question that Marvin was the one, because they have similar ceilings and Marvin had the higher floor. That being said, that's kind of what you want at a pick like this, when you could pick this high, is someone who has, the potential to be wide receiver one or the wide receiver one. And I think, Dustin accomplished it. It's a good pick for his team, and I think it adds to some already pretty good building blocks in Olave, Devonta Smith. I think he has a nice stable of running backs and quarterbacks. So it, this could end up being his wide receiver one in 2 years when the Giants figure it out. So good pick.
Yeah, I think for a team that we constantly put on the record saying, hey, we need a little bit more superstar talent, perhaps this might be the guy too. So, this could be like you said, the wide receiver one for him in a couple of years. So let's go to
Bold statement to say the Giants are going to figure it out. But
hey,
very bold.
I think they're going to throw resources a la the Falcons at the
Yeah.
quarterback position after this. And I think that'll end up shining on him well. In addition to that, there's not going to be a lot of target competitions for targets in the future. Like, they don't really have tight end. Barkley's gone. Like, this can end up being a situation where he just feasts on 120 plus targets as a rookie, just because there's not a lot. I mean, it's crowded, but it's crowded with, like, shitheads in a sense. Like, he could easily differentiate himself, like a DeAndre Hopkins did in Houston, with just bad quarterbacks and just dominate people.
yeah, the Giants have just like 4 wide receiver threes as their
That's how I
second.
feel.
I'm not thrilled with any of them, and he should just vault right to the top with his talent. So,
Isn't that what you want, though? Isn't that what you want if you're like a player like him, and about getting him in a situation? Like, I want guys that are like enough, because I don't want you to get triple, quadruple coveraged. But you're not a threat to take a massive workload for me, because again, at the end of the day, you're all wide receiver threes. So
I don't know. Is Darius Slayton still there as well? Like, he's just a quality pro player. He's not going to be a dynasty stud or a fantasy stud, but he just gets the job done.
The receiving leader 3 out of the last 4 years. Darius
There you go.
He's on my team, and I actually keep up with him. And he said at like autograph signings,
Like an old friend,
that he wants a new contract.
Oh,
and so
Honestly,
he's
he
like,
deserves it.
he's like, I'm not going to hold out, but he did say that. He's like, I think my play for the last few years has spoken for itself. I deserve a new contract. I'm not in the room. I don't know what he wants, but he has, like Sean said, he's been decent over the last few years, that he could for sure be a not a bad, like, wide receiver 3 if you can get a good slot receiver.
yeah, he's
Or
just
tight
a
end.
nice NFL guy. Let's go to 1-3. I took the last of, quote, the big 3 at receiver, Rome Odunze, who, frankly, in a lot of other years would probably be one of the top, if not the top receiver. I looked at him tape-wise. I really felt like he had some similar qualities to a Mike Evans with his ability to box out and make plays. But then he also has a little bit of wiggle, too, in the route running game. I mean, it's still much more to be developed there for him. But I really like the way he moved, on the outside, and frankly had a lot of Keenan Allen elements in the red zone with his route running ability. So, I mean, what better place to go for him to learn a little bit from Keenan, and then DJ Moore as well. And then Keenan, I think for this year is kind of just a one and done situation. And then who knows if he even plays a whole season. Neighbors in the better situation for, if you want to compare Neighbors and Odunze, you might just have to wait a little bit longer for Rome. And I'm okay with that because I truly believe in his talent. So I had him 3, obviously, on my board behind the big 2. But I really feel good about him kind of vaulting his way to a long-term wide receiver 2 or maybe 1 if it works out properly for him. How did you? I mean, Sean, you seem to be the fan club president here, so let's hear what you got to say about Rome.
The long-term outcome is what I'm really looking for. Like you made some comps. I mean, the comp that I've heard and I feel pretty good about is Devontae Adams for Rome Odunze.
Yeah, there's definitely some similarities.
It's spicy anytime you say somebody like that as a comp, but like he's so good. I think he wasn't even asked to do as much as he can do at Washington just because of the talent they had around him. And he's jumping into a similar situation here where he's probably going to be, I assume he's going to be the X receiver on the outside because Keenan's probably going to line up inside there. So, I mean, I like that as far as he's going to be on the field. He'll probably play more snaps than Keenan will this year.
It'd be an interesting Dynabook bet.
Probably less snaps and still less targets, I bet you still.
That's very possible. But
I agree, especially with injuries. I mean, Keenan can miss 4 games, and that alone will just tilt the stats if Rome plays a nice 60. But I agree with you a lot of your sentiment. I think he'll be out there. I think he'll be that. A lot of teams have that kind of young guy who's just always out there giving 100%, and I could totally see him being that guy for them this year. And he's a very talented player. I think this was an auto pick, kind of like the last 2 picks. Nothing spicy about these. I'd give them all A's because there's no other direction to really go. I think they were all good picks.
And I think this is probably where it opens up a little bit more here at 1-4. I took Jonathan Brooks here at 1-4. Another guy I really believed in the talent. You watch his college film. There's not a whole lot of film. Obviously, he was sitting behind 2 very good Texas running backs last year. I think he has less than 200 carries on his career, which is pretty wild. So he's going to be a 20-year-old rookie. He obviously has the ACL tear. Seems to be on track for training camp, which is a great sign for my team because I was kind of expecting maybe a little bit of a wait potentially, similar to like a Kendre Miller from last year. But I feel like he's going to be right in the mix. I know they signed a veteran the other day. I can't remember. Was it? It was the Philly guy, right? Penny.
Yeah. Penny.
So they have Penny. Obviously, they have Chuba still, and I think Miles Sanders might be on the way out here. But I really believe in Jonathan Brooks' talent. And having Canales as your coach means you're going to run the ball. And he really used Rachaad White in that workhorse role last year. So if maybe a similar outcome for Brooks would be a slam dunk here, I think at 1-4, especially given the running back scarcity this year. Anybody got any interesting thoughts on Brooks here?
I have Thad, if you're okay with it, Sean.
Yeah,
Let's do it. Okay, so I like Brooks a lot. The ACL injury, if not for that, this would have been a slam dunk pick here, and even probably would have challenged for a 1-3 consideration. I think comparing him to Rachaad White is very unfair to him because Rachaad White got a lot of snaps and a lot of work. And I just don't see Jonathan Brooks getting that this year in a very crowded backfield. The guy like Miles Sanders is owed a ton of money, although I still think could be cut. Chuba Hubbard, who's just been, what's the word?
Replacement level.
He had replacement level ability, but he's still been there. I think Jonathan Brooks is a guy who's going to be sneaky upside in redraft this year because he could own the backfield by week 7 or 8. But I still think this is a shit team. And I still think we got to keep in perspective. How many touchdowns are we really getting each week? Are we getting 2 touchdowns each week? Are we doubling our points almost?
They were so bad last year.
They were awful. So, I mean, I don't think he's going to really mature into a top fantasy player until at least year 2. But then and beyond, this could be his backfield. He could be the guy. I will caution, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that this is a Bishop Sankey type running back year. If you remember that year.
Where I remember Bishop Sankey very well. Of course, I did not want to hear that.
I'm going to credit James because he dropped that on me, and I was like, oh, man. Yeah, this has that feel a little bit.
what is the Bishop Sankey trait though? What is the
A
thing? Is it the
mediocre running
situation?
back class where a guy gets hailed as the obvious one because he's going to be the guy in a bad team that's a bad running situation overall. Just like when
Hey,
Bishop Sankey with the Titans and they weren't good. Just like Jonathan Brooks can go to the Carolina. Carolina may be bad for another 3 years, and they may all just be terrible together for another 3 years. And then, like a running back, his life cycle is short. There's a new coach, and he's moving on from him, etc. Like that's kind of similar to what happened to Bishop Sankey. It's not out of the realm of possibilities for
no,
Jonathan
not at
Brooks. If we
all.
talk about the ceiling floor thing, I think he has a really high ceiling. I think he could be, a 1,200-yard rusher by year 2 and a dual threat type guy too. Um, but I could also see, like you said, he doesn't have a lot of carries, which is a good thing, but is also doesn't have that experience. Like it really wouldn't shock me if he doesn't hit the ground running, he may never kind of get it going, especially
Yeah,
coming off of an ACL because some guys recover different.
yeah, it's
But
certainly
this
in
is
the
like a
range of
worst case
outcomes.
scenario. I
Yeah,
still think he could be. Still think he's going to be a very productive player. And I don't want to rehash the player too much. Like how this fits the Armadillos is what I think is important because now we're finally getting to the talks where we can actually talk about how it affects a team. Every team could use a young stunned wide receiver who's going to be with their team for 5+ years unless they absolutely face plant like the first 3 guys. The importance of this is how it matters to the Armadillos, who really, really need a running back for now and beyond.
yeah.
And I
I
think that's
mean,
the money with this pick.
yeah. I mean, and frankly, I could have gone a couple different directions with these 1-4 and 1-5 picks. Ultimately, chose the running back. I kind of felt like, like you said earlier, this is definitely not the slam dunk year for rookie running backs. There's no clear Jonathan Taylor. Just obvious choice here, especially at 1-4. Not even really a Javonte Williams, honestly. I think Javonte was a little bit better in terms of overall talent when he came out than Brooks, in my
I
opinion.
agree. I think it's
Um,
better and didn't have it coming off of a torn ACL. Uh,
mhm.
I would say that how this fits your team, though, is you have your 2025 pick that wasn't a factor last year. So there's a little bit of a different air about your team where you have your 2025 pick, you have a little bit of success in your back pocket. And so, you do need running backs, I think, if you want to repeat that success and compete. However, if you don't want to do that, if you want to slow roll it and just see what happens, you still have that option open to you because you have your pick, and this kind of helps insulate you because you now have another warm body to add to Achane and Warren and Kendra Miller, Gus Edwards.
And a
That's the
Gus
other one.
Edwards, of course.
That's
Yes.
it, though. I think, right? Is there
Bell
another one?
cow, Gus Edwards.
Is there another one
um,
after that, or am I forgetting?
Dylan Lobby, if you consider that a bell
I
cow as
guess,
well.
but not really. But
There's not a lot there, and
there's
that's
not a lot of
to
warm
your
bodies
point.
there, so you
To
needed
your point,
another
like
one.
we're still in we still have trade talks are still open. We'll put it that way to try to maybe pull in another guy. We'll see. But yeah, like you said, this is a big move for us, and just moving in the right direction at the running back position, and maybe taking it a different step here at 1-5 with Brock Bowers. I think I could see it being a controversial pick based on positional need, positional value, landing spot. There's a lot of things that you could say negative about this pick, I think, and I would understand those. And at the end of the day, I had my board set before the draft. I adjusted some people after the draft for landing spot, and I just could not move them down. And it's my love of tight ends, I think, that did me in here. Obviously, devastating to Michael Mayer's value, who's at this point in the Isaiah Likely category of a handcuff fantasy tight end, which is not a good thing, to be honest with you, from a second round pick last year. But I am very excited about Bowers as a player. I think his ceiling in year one is something in the realm of a Dalton Kincaid, which I have pulled last year, with him being the flex tight end that kind of gets open in the middle of the field and then makes things happen with run after the catch. So this is a long-term pick for me. I really believe that maybe in a year or two the quarterback situation will change. He might end up being the number one option as soon as next year if Devontae leaves in the receiving game. So I'm a fan of Bowers, and I truly believe in him as a player. So that's why I pick him here 1-5. Vince, what do you got on Bowers?
I would just say you really all 3 of these picks fit a timeline for your team. None of them are win now players. All 3 of them are 1 year to marinate players. But I would say 2 of them have bordering elite talent, and one of them is like a very good player in Jonathan Brooks. So I think all 3 of them, uh, I think it was a great, they all fit the same window, and I think they were all good picks. You know, in, you have the other tight end in Vegas, so it kind of saves you from yourself in a sense. Like, well, one of them has to hit. It just has to.
I mean, and they're both good talents too, which is like the crazy thing. It's not like one is a middling talent. One was, Mayer was a borderline first round pick last year. It's maybe a poor, from a Raiders perspective, a poor use of draft capital, from last year, but it's a different regime, of course. But like you mentioned earlier, I feel like I got with Caleb Williams in the second round, which we'll get to in a little while. I feel like I got 4 extremely good talents, and I'm very happy at at all the different positions too. So I feel like it's just making my team better, in the long term. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this develops. And like you said, I'm not expecting a whole ton out of these guys in year one, but if they did, then it would be a great little boost to the team. Sean, do you have any Bowers thoughts before we keep moving?
No, I mean, like when I do these rankings post draft, it's so hard to fight the urge between landing spot and talent. It's a fine line. I can't fight the talent for Bowers. I still had him at 6, which I hated the landing spot so much, but
it's just not fun for anybody, Sean. It's just like nobody wanted this.
But realistically, he could be the number 1 option on that team next year. It wouldn't shock me. Like Devontae Adams is over 30 at this point. Jacoby Myers is good, but I don't think he's like a number 1 option in an offense. I think Bowers has the capability of being the number 1. He was the number 1 in his offense for like the last 4 years at Georgia. So
he also has position scarcity, which in this case usually tight end works against them. In this case, kind of works for him because he is far and away the best tight end in this class. He'd be the best tight end in most classes. He'll probably be the best tight end in next year's class. So it's like if you're got a chance to get that type of guy and you have 3 picks, are you really going to dive right in with another wide receiver? Because that's the only alternative for your team. Because unless you wanted to reach on a Benson, like you just took Brooks, so I don't know who else you would have taken. Would you really have taken Trey Benson that high, Eric?
I would not have, based on my board. I mean, really, the only other option I was considering was one of, he was basically Brian Thomas or Brock Bowers, and I truly didn't believe Brian Thomas was worth the 1.5 capital. So anyway, I guess that's a good transition to moving here into 1.6 with the Kentucky Elk taking Xavier Worthy. I was not going to take Worthy at 1.5. I had him a little bit lower on my board at 8. For the Elk, I'm really impressed with what they've done with maybe getting some upside here at 6. But Sean, I see some giggles. What's the Worthy talk for you?
You're talking down on him like when you had him at 8. I've got him at 12.
See, there you go.
Yeah, I have him around where Sean does. I have him at 10. I actually had Xavier Legette higher than him. I have a different Xavier in my life.
Wow. Wow.
We'll talk about that later.
I feel like both of those guys are very controversial, not controversial, but very enigmatic, prospects from you could have them anywhere. I've seen all over the place from a ranking standpoint. I do feel like Worthy probably had the biggest window of maybe rankings throughout the league as far as where he could have gone.
Huge range.
So let's talk about it more from like a team fit here. He's going to the Elk, who picked up Neighbors, have 2 other good players. Are you okay with the upside shot here at 1.6, or would you rather have seen him go in a different direction?
He landed with one of the best possible teams he could have in Kansas City. I mean, he's gonna get the opportunity because they're gonna probably be down a receiver most of next year too, so that helps him.
I like it for Dustin's team because this will tell him early. Whatever this guy does, we'll know probably by middle of year 2. See, like in the Tony Sky Moore mold, or is this guy actually going to be something? Because really, the Chiefs kind of do figure these receivers out really quick. I mean, Sky Moore is only going into his 3rd year this year. He was taken with a similar pick, 1.5, I believe. This is 1.6 where he was taken. We know Sky Moore is basically a bust. I think he was cut in the other Dynasty League.
I wouldn't pick him up.
I wouldn't pick him up either. So I think that proves my point. Like when you're in Dustin's shoes with his he has a lot of draft capital coming next year. Like maybe one of those things where if this guy face plants, Dustin may flip him for a second next year and just be like, all right, I tried, let someone else pick up the pieces, and I'll just move on because he's gonna have bodies to cut. And I think that helps with a guy like this because not that this guy would have been selected here, but maybe a guy like Jalen Polk with Drake May, like that may take a little more time to marinate. You can't really cut that guy in the middle of a year too, because it may not just pop for the right reasons yet, because they got to take time. This is with Pat Mahomes. They just won 2 Super Bowls. They're trying to win a third. Kelsey just re-upped on a new deal. Like this is all systems go. We're gonna know about Worthy pretty quickly if this guy can play. Because if he's seeing the field, we'll see it. And if he ain't seeing the field, then what? Why not? Because the other receivers suck dick.
It's a tough situation out there before Worthy and Brown showed up. So, and then of course,
I would have
Risky, right?
taken Brian Thomas Jr. over him, but I have no issue with Xavier Worthy with this pick, even if I don't like it and wouldn't personally do it, because I think it's a boomer bust pick. It could work out. It might not.
And Worthy's like the exact kind of guy that I'm willing to be wrong on in fantasy. For me personally, I think it's just a draft mantra kind of thing because like I want somebody that I know is going to produce more so than everybody. Like once you hit like the middle of round 1, like your odds of hitting somebody go down a lot. But I don't know. I just like it's so easy to just like he's not like McCole Hardman. I think he's a better receiver than McCole Hardman coming to the NFL, but he's just so small.
He's like he's like 5'11", 165. He wouldn't be a first round pick in combat basketball. Why is he a first round pick in our dynasty draft? Like that's kind of like one of my metrics for this. Like if I would take like Alex and Christian and James over you in combat basketball, that I don't think you're beating press coverage in the NFL. I don't know how else to say it. Andy Reid's the master of scheming people open, but that just failed with Tony. That just failed with Sky Moore. That failed with Sammy Watkins. Like how many times are we going to say like, wow, this guy's so talented, it'll work out. Like Bill Belichick missed and Tom Brady missed on Chad Ochocinco and Albert Hainsworth. Like sometimes guys just don't get it at certain places. It doesn't work out. And that's been the case with a lot of Chiefs receivers. So wouldn't shock me with this one either.
I do think he's the most out of all those guys from a a technical route running perspective. I feel like out of these little small guys, he's got probably the best upside in that department.
I agree.
So I do feel that he's got that going for him as opposed to just being a guy that just runs straight, which he does well as well.
When I've heard people talk about upside for him, like they say Deshaun Jackson, and like when your upside comp is a guy that was like just a huge outlier his entire career, it's really hard for me to get on board.
Yeah,
well, the other one, Tyreek Hill, another massive outlier, which is just an unfair comparison.
And Tyreek Hill's body types, he's thick. Like
30 pounds heavier. He's got guns.
Yeah. I don't even consider him like a I hate skinny receivers more than small. I think there's a huge difference for me.
True.
We'll get to Troy Franklin later, please. Let's keep moving along.
If you're not 5'6", like Noel Devine or somebody like that, like as long as you're at least like got like a tall frame, then yeah, no muscle is really then the only deal breaker. Which is his problem.
So we talked a little bit about him here with Brian Thomas being ahead of Worthy on your boards pre-draft. Let's 1-7. The Bombers take Brian Thomas. I think Brian Thomas was a solid prospect. I don't think he was a great prospect overall. I mean, obviously his metrics are pretty amazing. Running 4.3 at 6'4", whatever it was. He was very, very great at the combine. And I do think he has a lot of developmental upside, but that's kind of the way I'm viewing him as a developmental upside guy.
What do we do for the Bombers? Do we take Trey Benson here?
Well, that's the thing is where else do you go? And I think he was kind of this pick was made for him in a way, with pretty much the positional value before the draft was Brian Thomas is pretty much the 5th guy off the board in most drafts. So to get him at 7 feels like good value. And frankly, this is a guy who, if he does hit, has T. Higgins like upside, just high end wide receiver 2 potential, in my opinion. I'm looking forward to seeing how he develops. It might just take him a little bit more time to get going. How do you feel about him in year 1? I should ask.
my question really is, or my statement on this is, I think this starts to be the beginning of a long story for the Bombers team that kind of has picks made for them, as you said. Marvin Harrison was the easiest one. We all, boom, we're done. This is another one for Justin's team. Like, but where do we really go from here? Bowers didn't make it here. Maybe that was someone to Justin adds to his tight end farm, sells Pitts or something. Boom, not an option. Are we going to go Trey Benson? It's a tougher pill to swallow for him than Tibbs's team because with Tibbs has James Conner. It's easier to invest in the whole backfield and say, no matter what, I'm going to get a running back out of this eventually. The pick was made for Justin. So do I believe he has, wide receiver one upside? Yeah. Kean Coleman, Lad McConkey, they all had day one, other than the big three, they all had day one ability to hit the ground running. And that's good for this Bombers team. But this Bombers team, this isn't where we're moving the needle. Like he had to make this pick, but it just is really like another flex player is really what this is going to be for him. What this amounts to him, at least for the short term.
Yeah, I mean his prime competition seems like Gabe Davis right now, and he just got paid a lot of money, so I have a hard time believing they're just gonna not put him on the field.
Are you talking about the Bombers or are you talking about the Jags? Because it applies
Frankly,
to
it could be
both.
either one. It
Like
could be either one.
that's kind of confuses that muddies the waters on this even more because we don't have running backs as an option if we're the Bombers. The running backs are already forced to start. We're not even talking about bye weeks, just like normal. We're already starting Zeke just because we have to. Week 1, we have to start Zeke. It's not great. A player like this, it's another Marquise Brown.
Bit of
I
a
wouldn't
wait and
even have
see.
him ahead of Jaden Reed even. I'd have Jaden Reed over him for at
I
least
feel
year one,
really
probably.
disconnected from you guys right now on this. I'm not gonna lie.
You how do you feel? How do you feel about
I,
Brian Thomas?
I think he's gonna roll in there as the number one receiver right away.
Okay. Okay.
I
So give me his rookie year projections then.
I had him at 105. Like I felt pretty good about it. I didn't love the landing spot, but like I mean, he's going with a quarterback that throws for a lot of yards right off the bat. He throws for a lot of yards, and he had the most drop catches in the NFL last year. So I mean, I think he's already better than Gabe Davis.
I mean, I think he's their best deep threat in
Gabe
day
Davis just
one.
got there though. Like they're clearly still committed to them. Like even if we think he's better, it's really irrelevant. Like they gave Davis big money, and he has he's a vet. So I do think he'll come in and be obviously very effective. But I also think like guys like Evan Ingram have been really, really productive. He had 143 targets last year. Don't get me wrong, they'll shave a lot of those off for a guy like Brian Thomas, but a lot of Brian Thomas's production is going to come out of what Calvin Ridley was doing last year. So I the targets
Yeah, but
vacated.
Ingram's production went up so high when Kirk got hurt last year, so I'm not really worried about him.
That's
I
true.
think Kirk is going to be the number one target guy on the team for me.
Well, you kind of just said that Brian Thomas was going to be the number one guy on the team.
I think he's going to be the alpha receiver. I don't necessarily mean that doesn't necessarily.
But I don't think his numbers will reflect that he's an alpha receiver. I think he's still going to have probably have like 900 yards and like 6 touchdowns, which is a really good rookie year for a wide receiver. That's not bad at all. It's just like in a fantasy perspective, that's a flex player. That's a flex player.
Yeah, I mean, like Jordan Addison would kind of be the top end of his, expectations from last year. Get a little bit more red zone looks and end up just around 1,000 would be kind of like a great. I mean, to me, that would be a phenomenal outcome for Brian Thomas in year one.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah, I think it would too. That's not a knock, but just from terms of fantasy production, which Jordan Addison I think is a great player. That was wide receiver. That was wide receiver 19. It was pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah, just solid.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are just talking about like he's like a consolation prize that got handed to Justin because he had to take it. Like I don't think that's true.
I don't mean it like that. I just mean it as like this was the obvious pick for Justin. Like Brian Thomas is probably the best player available, even if he doesn't fit a position in need. The next best player available, in my opinion, for Justin is probably another wide receiver on his board. So wide receiver, it's all the same situation. Might as well take the one who's projected better in Brian Thomas.
Yeah, and before we move on to the next pick, we have a comment here from James C. who's saying combat basketball and another Noel Divine reference. Thumbs up. See, love the peanut gallery out there. We got 3 people watching live, so that's pretty good. We got 6 league members around here. Let's go to pick 1-8. And we had Trey Benson going to the Cheese Fries in one of what feels like 400,000 running back picks for the Cheese Fries this year. Trey Benson, I had him at 11 on my board personally. I feel like I didn't love the tape at times. I did like some of the stuff I saw from him in between the tackles, and I see the upside. Obviously, the injury a couple of years ago was a really bad one. Nick Chubb level bad injury. He managed to come back from it, and he was a huge part of the FSU offense this year. He lands in a pretty good spot overall. He's going to have to wait probably a year behind Connor. But from a long-term perspective, this could be like for the Cheese Fries specifically, because they already have Connor. This is really kind of, it feels like a little bit of a no-brainer to just kind of secure the backfield, right?
That's how I felt, and that's why I don't like the pick if Justin would have made it at 1-7, and I love the pick for Tibbs. Not love, but I like the pick for Tibbs here, because for Tibbs, you're just insulating yourself with James Conner. When James Conner misses his textbook 3, 4, 5 games that he misses, got the guy. He's back there. He's ready. He's got draft capital. As long as he doesn't shit the bed in training camp, he's in here. It's a good pick. I had him where you had him, Eric. And I think Justin did too. I think Justin thought he would fall to him at 1-1 or 2-1, and that's why he had no worries about taking Brian Thomas and moving on. But I think Tibbs made a savvy pick here. I think he got his handcuff, kind of like in a redraft league, how you value your handcuff more. This is the dynasty version of that. Tibbs doesn't have another opportunity to take him. Nowhere close. Tibbs's next pick is 2-8. So he ain't making him the 2-8. Take your guy. I like the pick for the Cheese Fries. And I like the philosophy. I think it made sense. I think it was the only team it made sense for. And so I think it was a good pick. Sean?
I had him down at 16 on my board, so I didn't love it, to be honest. He's okay. He's a pretty good gap runner. His vision's pretty not great.
Pretty ass, Sean.
For me, he's got that knee injury, so I think he could be a shorter career too. Like, looking at Tibbs' team, I understand that you want to like solidify a backfield, but I feel like there were receivers on the board that were just much better picks for me. So I didn't love it.
He has a really deep receiver room. So it's hard
too.
He's just a good team overall.
I would just go best player available, and for me, it wasn't. So.
Yeah, but I think running back is a lot more fickle than these other positions, and it's one of those things that if it falls apart on you, and it can very suddenly, your whole playoff chances, you can have a phenomenal season and your playoff chances just die, just completely are done because you didn't have your handcuff or something like that. I think it's a good pick, and I think it's, if you think he's gonna have a shorter career, I think that even is better for the Cheese Fries, because he's another guy who has draft capital. He has a good team. He doesn't want a guy who's going to linger and roster clog. I think he plans on James Conner being done after this year, and then Trey Benson being the guy next year. And I see the vision, and like I said, I like the pick because it would not have been here later. So I think for the Cheese Fries, it was good. If he had no wide receivers, though, then I'd absolutely agree, and I'd hate the pick then. But this is a guy who's already starting 6 deep in his flex with wide receivers, and they all sound like great names to me: Garrett Wilson, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, Pittman, Drake London, Debo. Like, he has Josh Jacobs on the bench right now, and James Conner on the bench. So I like it. I think it's a nice depth feast. So.
Yeah, he won't need him to play right away, that's for sure.
But segue to Sean's favorite guy next.
I was gonna say, so Sean, clearly this was probably number 6-5 on your board, bro.
Who he thought that this pick should have been? Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, I mean, I had Ladd at 104, so obviously I'm going to be the highest one here in the room. I mean, he's a good player, and he got a great landing spot, and that's a lot of the battle for me in drafting Dynasty. So he's going to lead that team in targets year one. Leave him receiving. I know everybody's up their ass about, they're going to run the ball nonstop. Like, they're still going to throw the ball like 30 times a game. no team throws the ball less than that really in the NFL. So
Yeah, I think it's a great pick for 1.9. I had him at 1.7 on my board. Just an elite route runner coming out of college. I mean, you can't ask for anything more. He creates separation.
he
My
could
only
do,
real concerns with him are really just size, maybe durability, perhaps.
oh
He's
yeah,
not
I
like
think
super
durability, yeah,
small,
for sure. Yeah, he
but
definitely
he's
had some injuries in college, that's for sure. But he was great against SEC corners when he played. So
Yeah, and he was great
I'm
at
not
the
worried.
Senior Bowl. Really stood out. He got separation on Quinyon multiple times. I mean, he's a
Mhm.
first round guy. I have no doubts he's going to be a good NFL player. I think he's, if I had to bet on any guy to just be outside of the top three, of course, to be like a very solid NFL player, it's going to be Lad McConkey. So I love the pick here at 1.9.
I love the pick for Dustin's team. In my opinion, it could have been Lad, Keon, and or even Ricky, and I wouldn't have said anything about any of them. I could see the vision with all of them. When you're in Dustin's shoes, there's not a lot of wrong picks until we get to Blake Corum. But with these wide receivers, like we really can't go wrong. No issue with the pick. It's perfect for him just loading up on some talent. He got this from that Etienne trade last year, and I think it's gonna end up making that trade look pretty decent for him because I think Lad will be like Sean said, he'll just be a solid producer. He may not ever be, guy who's wide receiver one, but he'll be a good player.
Yeah, I would definitely bet on him being a good player and a very different kind of receiver here at 110 for the Armadillos, Keon Coleman. I went back and forth on him on my board. I ended up with him at 9. And the reason is I just see something special with his ability to make contested catches. Obviously, I haven't had some luck with these guys in recent memory with the Hakeem Butlers of the world. And maybe not as great as an analytical profile, but I do think he's more athletic than his 40 time alludes to. And I think he has a ton of upside if he can stay dedicated to his craft and become a better route runner. He was outproduced Jaden Reed his first year at Michigan State. I think there's a lot of things there for him that could go right and really make him a great dynasty asset. And honestly, number one is really just Josh Allen. If he gravitates towards Keon Coleman and he becomes the guy in that offense, I would like to have the guy in the Bills offense. So I'm willing to take a shot here at 110 on a player like this because I kind of went safe long term with the first 3 picks. I feel like I could take a little bit of a shot here at 110 and then have some picks later on to add more talent. So Coleman's a bit polarizing. So where was Coleman on you all's boards? I'm curious, Sean. Where was he on yours?
You nailed it, man. I had him at 10.
There we go.
I like Coleman a lot. I think he's one of the most sure-handed receivers in the draft, if not the most. I think he's ideally big slot receiver. I think we talked about that before, but I mean, the biggest thing for him is he's pretty good off script, and that's what he's gonna have to be with Josh Allen. So I mean, I like it. He played with a scrambling quarterback a little bit in college, so I think he's gonna have an idea of what to do. So I'm a big fan. I like it a lot.
Yeah, the situation just seems like it works. Vince, do you have any Keon Coleman thoughts?
I think the situation is really what stirs the drink here. If this guy would have went to maybe Carolina or somewhere else, we'd be just saying, well, the targets are there, the targets are there. I think it's because they're quality targets that Keon Coleman was able to be solidified as a first round pick. Only just barely though. I had him higher
Good
on my
class.
board. For sure had him higher than Benson and Worthy. And I even had to drop Bowers below him after the draft news. I even had actually Brooks behind him too. So, but I really wasn't too high on any of these running backs. I thought it would be probably 7 or 8 players before we saw the first running back. So seeing 2 in this 8 was a little shocking. It was the right pick though. And I think I don't want to say again you were forced to make this pick because I think there were options like a Ricky Parasol, but it had to be a wide receiver here uh, because you had other picks. So it's like a guy like Caleb will probably be there, and I think that's why you kind of had to punt till that pick on that. I think it was the right move.
Yeah, it's funny because I did have Caleb at 10 on my board, and then Keon was at 9. So, I was thrilled to get him at 2-3. But let's keep moving on here. We had Ricky Pearsall at 2-1 to the Bombers. I had him at 12 on my board, so obviously right kind of in line there. Where did you guys have him on your boards? Actually, we'll start with that.
I had him at 8.
Okay, so another Ricky Pearsall fan in the fan club out there.
Big,
I had him
Vince,
at
what
8.
did you have him at? Yeah, okay, so
I had him at
2-8.
8 too.
yeah,
Okay.
he's
Yeah.
probably the best route runner in the class, and he went to Kyle Shanahan. So I think that's just fucking sweet music to me. So even if I
also,
wait here,
it's a good offset to the Brian Thomas pick too, because it's the opposite type of like this guy's more of a marinate. We got to
Yeah.
let him get time in this offense, but it could end up being the guy later. Brian Thomas could be the guy now, but he feels like a little more heading for that boom or bust territory. Because it seems like he's like Sean kind of said, he's going to get all the targets. Whereas Ricky Pearsall, he'll be just a nice player to sit on because he could just explode onto the scene randomly in a year or two.
Yeah, and
honestly, it wouldn't shock me if he gets on the field a little more than we might think in year one, just because he's very good against man, and they struggled outside of Ayuk to get open against man coverage last year. So
Kittle and Debo get hurt a lot too, which just would naturally just bump up pass catchers on that team. So
I could be wrong, but did they lose Jawan Jennings too as well?
no, they gave him a second round tender.
Okay, so he's back.
Let me say this, and I don't know if you guys agree. Is this the cutoff in the draft? Because in my opinion, it is. This pick right here, I think there becomes a small talent gap when we go to Pearsall to the not talent, but in terms of dynasty value, there becomes a gap when we get to the next set, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a tier break here.
I have Leggett higher than most, but that's because I'm smoking crack. So that's different. But I still think he would have not been in this. I think these other guys were higher. Even if I don't really love the worthy pick, I see the vision with the landing spot. Do you guys
First
agree
round
with that?
draft capital too. I mean,
I've got 2 more players, and I think there's a bit of a drop off for me.
Okay, well, who are those 2 players then right now?
We haven't talked about them yet.
Okay.
Well, was one of them Blake Corum at 2-2? And so that's the next question here. The Elk take Blake Corum, landing spot with the Los Angeles Rams. Vince, I heard you talk about him a minute ago with maybe the wrong pick. What do you think?
It's a weird pick. I'll return this question back on you. How's this Blake Corum really any different than Jalen Wright in Miami?
I mean, similar opening day role, just kind of a backup basically, and you got to pray for a Mostert injury or even an A-chain injury.
You don't have to pray that hard for them.
And for Mostert, a bit of a fluke last year in my opinion, but
I'd argue Jalen Wright has a more NFL body. Like he looks like the type of guy who could hold up more with the rigors of an NFL workload and stuff like that. Now maybe Corum could be like an MJD type of guy, Maurice Jones-Drew, and it's just one of those short guys who's just built different. I don't know, but it to me felt like he's one of those guys who's just going to be a clear backup in the NFL, maybe because I thought more highly of him, but clearly NFL teams did not. And
yeah,
I think
he went lower than most people thought as well in the
he
real
went
draft.
lower than I thought he was going to go, and that kind of just it has to drop him on my dynasty board. Dustin had other picks. I think if you would have flipped Leggett and Blake Corum, I would have felt better about it. I guess maybe, but
yeah, that's true.
I don't know where Corum. I think Corum would have been. I think Corum would have probably went all the way to Justin's pick at 2-7. So I didn't love the pick for Dustin. It was okay. I liked the player more than most people, but once the landing spot became what it did, and Sean McVay described him as Kyren Jr. It's like, my guy, you already have Kyren, and Kyren was phenomenal last year. Like, I know he was hurt and he's going to get less carries probably, but is Blake Corum really going to be fantasy relevant without an injury? I'm not so sure. And do I want a player that doesn't really have a path to fantasy relevance at 2-2? No, I don't.
Sean, anything to add on Corum?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks that it feels like we're bashing on Corum, and I don't think Vince means to do that. It's just like, I think me and him would both take him just a bit lower. But I do like Corum. I think his size, speed kind of hurt him. Like his draft capital, he's just a little undersized. He probably needs to gain a little bit of weight for the NFL to take those hits. But I mean, I like him a lot. He's definitely, I would say, he's probably the smartest running back in this class. Like he knows how to get you the 4 or 5 yards that you need every time he gets the ball. So I like that. So I mean, that's going to keep him on a roster for a long time.
I don't
Um,
know, man. It doesn't look like he has a clear path to fantasy relevance
oh, I'm not
without.
talking about fantasy relevance. I was just talking like
Well,
he'll
that's
be a
what
guy.
this whole podcast is about, though. You know, the fantasy relevance for Blake Corum and the Dustin Gilchrist Senators. You know, their team needs fantasy points. I do like. I think he built a pretty nice stable of running backs over time, pretty naturally. Like actually, I had Marshawn Lloyd over Corum on my board. Which
Yeah,
is
I
whose
had
player
Corum at
Dustin.
16 and Lloyd at 18, so
Yeah,
not
they
too
were
far
back to
apart.
back for me.
Yeah, but he got Lloyd,
18.
almost a full round later, 8 picks later at 2-9. So, uh, I in the frame of Dustin's team, it's just another running back to add to the stable. And as we've seen with running backs, they're unpredictable, they're volatile. Sometimes a running back gets hurt early, and then the other guy that's there gets the backfield the whole year and just happens to be good with it or just passable. Like a Chuba Hubbard was just passable with his shares of the backfield. But just passable as a running back is still usually better than most wide receiver twos because running
Yeah,
backs just get points like that. So I even if I don't love the pick, I like the vision of kind of what Dustin was going with when he got running backs on running backs to already add to what I think is a pretty nice young stable of running backs. He's got James Cook. Like I think Tajay Spears is going to be a nice little 1-2 punch. He's got Zamir White, Roshan Johnson, Chase Brown. Like he's got a lot of committee guys. Ty Chandler, it wouldn't shock me if these guys, these bodies sort themselves out and Dustin becomes a bye-week slayer because he has 6 running backs deep of guys that might randomly be popping off. When again, we talked about a team like a Justin. Justin's got 3 running backs, and then like his 4th best running back is like Isaiah Spiller, who's like cuttable.
yeah, I do like what for his team layout and just based on the value that was on the board. Like sure, I see the vision and I agree with you there. So let's move to 2-3. Caleb Williams, the fall ends for Caleb Williams if you call it a fall. First round quarterbacks are becoming less likely in our league, and then who was picking in the first round kind of had a lot to do with this as well. I think if Scavelli was in the first round, you would have seen Caleb Williams come off the board. But with Dustin and Justin both having very quality quarterback rooms, it just made sense that it kind of fell this way. I thought the only other option in the first round was really Tibbs at 1-8. Just in case he wanted a Richardson tandem pair, but he opted for Trey Benson. When it got to the second round, I was trying to trade up for Caleb Williams at 2-1. The deal did not work out, and I got him at 2-3 anyway, so everybody's happy.
Do you have the best quarterbacks in the league now with Jalen Hurts, Purdy, and Caleb? I think that's
I
your
feel
3
very
pack,
good
right?
about that right now. Yeah. And another thing that factored in, I mentioned on draft night, is just maybe Jalen Hurts sees a little bit of a dip in production from a fantasy perspective this year if the tush push isn't quite as prominent. Maybe he ends up a little bit lower on the overall spectrum towards the end of the year based on the fact that really he's I think he had how many touchdowns he have on the ground last year, Sean? 15, 16,
14 something.
something
Yeah,
stupid.
it was outstanding.
I don't remember.
I mean, I don't know if we'll get that same number next year. And I love the upside of Williams here. So I
It was
just
a
think
good
it's
pick, and he wouldn't have been
easy.
here. Scavelli would have taken him with the next pick. So it was do
Exactly.
or die for you. So I think it was a good pick for you. I think this also, when you have quarterbacks, if you're not, sometimes you got to throw shit at the wall because it's all you can get. If you can get 3 premium prospects, you got 2 for cheap. Now you kind of had to pay for one, but you're paying because you don't need to fish anymore. Let's just get a sure thing. You only need to roster 3 now going into the near future for at least the next year or two. It's a good move. It's a really good move for you. Um, and to segue into the next one, Scavelli, I think Jaden Daniels is an excellent move for him. I think that he was another guy that you couldn't go into with the Steelers situation, Levis, and that's it. That's all you have.
I
We're
mean,
gonna
from
get like 40 passing touchdowns from the three of them combined if we're lucky. No, no. It was a good move to take a guy like Jaden Daniels, who I would argue may end up being the best year one starter of the bunch because of his rushing upside and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, if he stays healthy and ends up getting reaching the rushing potential that he has, sure, I could definitely see him beating the rookie wide or quarterback one. He's definitely going to start week one. I think Mariota is the only other person there, so that's basically nobody. And I like Jaden Daniels as an upside guy. And frankly, we're at 2-4. This is kind of right where he should be going. So from Scavelli's team, he really needed a quarterback. He got the number 2 overall pick. He's going to be the starter for at least 3 years with that kind of capital. I think it's a good pick.
Because we're gonna probably have to breeze through the later rounds. Let me give a shout
Sure.
out that goes with this pick, the Luke McCaffrey pick to get that stack and kind of do it. You got the other guy like pretty cheap, everything lined up nice. Like it's a pretty shrewd maneuver by Scavelli to start picking up the pieces of what now is basically a closed window. Let's call it what it is. Like,
With
will he
limited
be?
capital.
Well, he has limited capital. He'll be scrappy next year, but I don't think anybody here, if we did our power rankings, is putting Scavelli as a top 4 team. So
Probably
taking
not
a
at this
running
point.
back or a win now wide receiver isn't that smart. I think taking a quarterback, a stack to go with it. This is the type of thing that we're gonna look back on a Dyna recap episode 2 years from now and be like, look at Scavelli just stealing the stack right from under us for
Does it every
value. Like
year.
it'll happen. It'll end up happening. So I like that one. It was good.
Yeah, we can go to 2-5 here.
Whoa, 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 whoa,
Oh, sorry.
whoa.
You got
Oh,
something to
oh,
say?
yeah. That's Jaden Daniels guy. Hold on a
I
second
didn't even talk to
Jaden Daniels
Bill
guy.
Williams yet. Jesus, you guys just flying along. I killed at 1-7, so I would have been first. I would have been fine with him in the first round, to be honest. He's clearing away QB1 for me in this class. I don't even think it's close. I think he's great. That was it. That was really it. Jaden Daniels was a good pick. I had him at 2. I had him at 13, so I thought it was fine. High rushing upside. He doesn't have the body to be able to take hits in the NFL, so he's probably going to die. But it's a good pick.
Yeah, I had him at 19 basically for durability concerns. That was really it. Fantasy wise, he had upside. But all right, so here we go. 2-5. Jalen Polk. I debated very heavily between Polk and Adonai Mitchell. I love them both. I went with Polk because I can see the clear path to him being just a solid Chris Godwin kind of guy. Probably not really going to get into that elite tier with his athletic traits, but I'm okay with that. And I do believe that he has NFL ready, skill set, his route package, his ability to get off press. I think he's going to be a good fit with Drake May too. And I just think it could have a potential to be just a quality wide receiver pick. In a couple of years when we look back at the draft, say, okay, that was a nice little pick here at 2-5. Whereas Adonai Mitchell is a little bit more of a swing for the fences kind of guy. So I just like the safety of Polk in my head in this spot, and I had him ranked 13 on my board. So just a couple of spots behind this or ahead of this pick. So I'm a big fan of Polk, and I think he has a lot of upside.
Somebody here's a bigger fan of Polk.
Oh no, where'd you have him?
I had him at 10. I know Vince
Oh,
was
wow.
asking where the drop off was. I think this is the last player before that drop off when we were talking earlier. I love Polk, man. I think he's got so much more to give as a receiver just because he was playing behind Odunze, and he was still great in college. Honestly, pretty great landing spot. I think he's pretty easily like the number 1 receiver there.
I think he's a starter at the very least.
Yeah. So, and I've got May right now. Like I actually statted out the Patriots, which hurts me already. I gave him like 13 starts this year, I think.
So 3 or 4 for Brissett.
Yeah. So there. So I kind of like that.
Right.
I think it's going to be a little more upside once he gets into the games because I don't know. I like May a lot. So obviously we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, man, I love Polk.
I don't have anything against Polk. Nothing against Polk. I think though, my criticism of maybe like this pick And some of the other ones you kind of have, Eric, is I really think you're setting yourself up for some really, really tough decisions with kind of the incest of having a lot of teammates. You drafted Kean Coleman. Cool, love Kean Coleman, but you also have Dalton Kincaid, who you're kind of relying on. You drafted Bowers. You have Michael. You drafted Polk. You then went on and drafted Javon Baker. You drafted Roman Wilson. You have George Pickens. What else? What else? Am I missing
Unfortunately,
any?
my board fell in a way that I ended up with all these guys.
No,
And
I
it
know,
was
and
like,
one or two of them isn't too crazy, but a lot of them, like you're gonna have some really, really tough decisions, and with a roster as talented as yours, um, you're probably gonna be letting some tough cuts walk out the door just because you have no choice.
yeah, I do agree, and this is definitely something that crossed my mind as I was making these picks. I mean, even if the other guy on my board, Adonai Mitchell basically just wipes out the Alec Pierce, and I mean, at least we know Pierce is toast, but um, there's some decisions that I had to think about in terms of that, like earlier on too, when I was considering Worthy, kind of already have Rice. It's like, which way do I go? Um, I just kind of like to pick the guys I believe in from a talent perspective and kind of let itself sort itself out. Even if that means a couple of them end up going to the wind. I just like to bet on my guys. So it kind of ended up being that way this year, unfortunately.
After this point in the draft, I feel like you should just take the guys that you believe in the most. I don't think landing spot after this point really matters too
Yeah, but
much.
just from a team building perspective, I see where Vince is coming from. It's like you
Yeah,
have
that's
too
why I
many
said if it was
redundant
just
assets.
one, I could let it slide. But there's like 4 or 5 of these where we're just gonna get to a point where Eric's already a really talented roster, and it's gonna make it harder to cut guys because it's just like, well, you've both have kind of shown something. Whereas when you kind of have like one guy you can plant your flag on, it makes it easier. I'll give you like a more mature version of that situation, like a Nico Collins and a Tank Dell. Like you wouldn't have a choice but to start both of them each week because they're both really talented.
Like,
But
start
do you
with the
really feel
small.
great about that? I wouldn't feel too. I
Yeah,
wouldn't love doing that each week. I don't know. I'd rather diversify. I'd rather have a guy of Tank Dell or Nico Collins' ability on a different team and starting them. It just feels like I get more upside from that kind of two-player system rather than having them both on the same team. But I do agree with what you said. Like, I see what all these picks like again, like Polk. I would have taken Leggett over him, but we're splitting hairs because him and Adonai Mitchell were all great. When you get to your next pick in Roman Wilson, the two running backs who I know, right? I shouldn't put words in your mouth. You would have taken one of them, wouldn't you?
100%. Yeah, I had both Corm and Lloyd ahead of him on the board.
That's what I figured. So that's why it's like when you took Roman Wilson to go with your
I
pick,
tried to
it's
trade that pick too. So.
what else would you have done? Because Jalen Wright and Lloyd were on your board and got picked. Oh well, it happens. So I get it. And then after that, what Sean says is 110% true. Like you're not going to take a guy in the fourth because you have another guy in the team. Like who gives a shit? Take your guys. But it was just my comment on more of the overall draft. On the draft podcast that I brought it up. I think on draft night a little bit. I was like, damn, 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 and it just something on my mind.
Yeah, just a lot of the things that just kind of played out the way they did. Leggett was
situation
it just? Oh, sorry.
situation can be important with that too. Like if you're starting two guys on a top 5 offense, I don't think any of us really have a problem with it.
Yeah, I feel better about the Bills than
Not
I
to
do
say
the
that
That's what I was
Patriots.
gonna say, Eric. Bill's one is where Eric's gonna be getting away with starting two, but
yeah,
no one's feeling
yeah.
good about starting Roman Wilson and George Pickens each
No,
week.
no, 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 no. Not right. We're not right now. And then yeah, Jalen Warren too potentially.
I love
The
that pick for Tibbs. I love the Jalen Warren pick. I was foolish and thought that
Jalen
there may
Wright.
be a prayer in the world that he fell to me at 3-3. And when he went at 2-8, I was like, no, I should have known that because he was a good player. He's got the speed. We all know Mostert's not long for this world, and I don't think any of us think Achane's a 280 touch guy. So I think we all think Jalen Wright could be the Mostert of the future. Me personally, I do.
I do too. Here at 2.6, we had Xavier Leggett. I know you guys both seem to
Oh
have
yes,
him a
I
little bit
cut
higher.
ahead.
It's okay. We can use that for our analysis at 2.8, but at 2.6, yeah, Xavier Leggett. I mean, I had him at 13 on my board. I felt good about him. Um, there's a lot going against him analytically. Frankly, the fit Panthers, nobody loves the landing spot that much, probably. Kind of just feels like it could be a bust pick, to be honest with you. Like it just feels like the at least on my board, I thought he was like the clear guy. It's like, okay, I could see this guy busting very easily. That being said, I do like some of the things I saw on his senior year tape. Like there was a lot of things too. Like he's a big guy, he's extremely athletic, can create separation, and he's got the coolest accent in the history of accents. But then I could also see a lot of Treylon Burks in this game, where that's a guy that literally might be completely useless now that Tyler Boyd is out there.
I'm not so sure his route tree can translate fully into the NFL and work on a team that's not like the Chiefs or somebody like that who can make it work. And on a team like this, that's thirsty for a guy who can kind of do it all. A guy that can come in and be the guy who could be a target hog. I'm not so sure this is that guy. Like this may be more of your like MVS running wind sprints kind of guy. If this doesn't work out on a bad team. That being said, I still had him as like I had him at like 7. So
yeah, it's just
I think the upside is there. I think it's one of those guys. I like the situation, I think, more than most because it's destitute. There's no expectations. No one thinks these guys are going to be good. There's no other really big target catchers there. I think there's all the upside in the world for this to explode and be good. I think at 2.6, this is phenomenal upside.
Yeah, and draft capital is very good too here for Legette. So he'll be around. Sean, what do you think about Legette?
This is about where I had him. Fifth-year breakout players in college usually don't translate, so it's tough. Like every situation is different, and COVID and everything that could definitely be something.
The COVID is the pass that I give him to.
For sure. Like, and I think there's so many older prospects that a lot of them are going to buck that trend this year. It's just one of those things that I'm just willing to be wrong about again. But he's really good with the ball in his hands, and Bryce Young could really use a guy that could just catch the ball at the line of scrimmage and get 10 to 15 yards.
Go straight. So,
yeah, they just
like that for them. And he's really athletic.
Yeah, I mean, if you can just get him on those shallow crosses and stuff, he seems like a guy that could really help a guy like Bryce Young. So
I don't want to draft anybody that plays for David Tepper, so just fuck that guy.
Dude, that guy's awful. 2-7, Adonai Mitchell for the Bombers. Like I mentioned earlier, I had him kind of right neck and neck with Polk. This is a guy I just believe in the tape. I really loved a lot of the things that he showed. Analytically horrible, might be the worst analytically driven player this year. But I see something there. And I think he's just a good boom bust guy as well. And I think this is a good value here at 2-7, to be honest.
I agree. There's nothing you said is wrong. Let me hit you with a question. If Justin could look at the draft board now, would he maybe take a running back knowing that he ain't going to get one really like that for the rest of the draft?
Because you make a good point, yeah.
The cutoff comes quick after this with Jalen Wright and Lloyd. I think this pick, great pick. I think this is the BPA. This is the best player available. I think for Justin's team being running back starved, I think if he knew what he knew now, I think he would have taken one of the other running backs.
I think from a competition standpoint, even Lloyd, one injury and he's kind of right in there for this year. And then next year, he's kind of already the shoe-in. So it could have been a little bit more of a forward-thinking play too. To maybe go a different direction, the receiver. Sean, do you think he made the right call here, or would you rather him
I'm pretty low on 80. I had him at 21. So I can't, like, the tape is actually very good. Like watching it, like he passes the eye test. I don't know. The only thing I can tell you is I just get bad vibes, which is not a good way to describe anything.
I feel the same way about Legette. So
I don't know. I don't know. He makes me nervous, man. I think he's on a great team because I think Shane Steichen is going to get the best out of anybody on his team. So if he's going to do it, I think he's going to do it with Steichen. But I don't know. I don't love it.
I don't hate the pick itself. It's just more about a roster standpoint. Justin's team, he needs to get running backs or else we're really just having a dead year and just building towards next year, which is ironic because next year does have some sick running backs, but still. I think if he knew what he knew now, he may have taken the other running backs. but it was still a really good pick. And like I said, the BPA. I said what I said about Jalen Wright. So if someone wants to pick up from there and how that fits maybe how it fits the cheese fries or what kind of dynasty player this guy could be.
Yeah, I mean, I like Jalen Wright as a player. I do think there was some concerning things on his tape. Really loved to bounce it outside. Almost did nothing in between the tackles. His first thought is always go outside. And that could be coached out of him. But he's electric. And truly, I mean, from a Dolphins perspective, he's just a Dolphins guy. It makes perfect sense. Mostert's not going to last forever. Jeff Wilson's probably on his way out. It just makes sense for the Dolphins, and I get it. From a long-term play. And I'll tell you, whenever they get to the point of having Jalen Wright, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Achane on the same field, like I don't know who you game plan for on defense. It's just there's just so much speed. I don't even know what you do. So
A broken play is going to happen almost accidentally. It's going
you
to
just
happen.
fucking fall into them basically at that point.
Yeah, it's the same thing I
crazy.
said about Steichen. Like, you have a running back in Miami, I feel like McDaniel is going to get the best out of you. He's a great run game coordinator. So
yeah, it's his specialty. So I'm in 2.8, pretty sweet value here too.
I'm not even going to say the value's that sweet because, like I said, I do think Adonai Mitchell and Leggett and Polk were all the better players and picks. I just think that this is a good pick, and I think with a team like Tibbs, we said he's 6 receivers deep. Is a guy like Roman Wilson really moving the needle for him? No. Jalen Wright could end up being a guy. I could see Mostert and Achane being hurt, and Jalen Wright's the only healthy running back and being like a week 11 like auto start because he's like everyone's in their top 10 RBs of the week because of the opportunity. So I think this is a great pick. Great pick for Tibbs, short and long term. With the value you do get at 2.8. So yeah, I guess in that sense it is a good value. I guess you're right. I talked myself into it.
All I had to do was let you talk. So I'll say this: we're at an hour and 11 minutes. I was thinking about cutting it here after round 2, and then maybe we could pick up with the we have it called the shithead special for rounds 3 through 7, because a lot of those players will be looking back on it in a couple of years, saying, "Oh my God, what the hell were we thinking with any of these guys?" But let's talk about Marshawn Lloyd here, and then Roman Wilson, and then we'll cut it for tonight. But Lloyd, a player that I thought had a lot of upside on tape. Really had some fumbling issues. Hopefully that can be coached out. He ends up in Green Bay. He'll be behind Josh Jacobs for year 1 for sure. And I believe A.J. Dillon's the only other guy there. Frankly, it won't be too hard to beat him out, I think, at this point in his career. Probably just an RB3 for him. So, I mean, for the Elk, I like getting another upside running back, maybe a little bit more of a long-term play in terms of, you're not expecting much this year, but an injury could happen. And then Lloyd, could easily be the guy next year. He got good draft capital, and I like the player, so I think this is a good pick at 2.9.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Jacobs last year wasn't good. He signed essentially a 1-year deal this year. I mean, honestly, like, if Lloyd comes in and he figures out the fumbling thing, like, he could really dig into that this year and then just be the guy next year. That's an outcome. Another outcome could be that he doesn't figure out the fumbling and he can't get on the field. So, but the upside is pretty good for 2.9. I like it a lot.
No, I like what Dustin's doing in general. Like I said, I don't like the Corum pick just because I don't really like Corum at 2.2. But I like the overall scheme just that Dustin is doing here. Let's keep in mind when we talk about Dustin's team in particular, this is a guy who's 4 first-round picks next year. 4 first-round picks next year. He also has 5 second-round picks next year. That's 9
of the top 20
players coming in. Yeah, think about 9 of the top 20 in this draft. Think about it in this regard. Like, that's a lot of really good players. I think Dustin is trying to build this a lot very naturally in that, he's not trading really for splash running backs or anything like that. Like, he's building a little bit of everything, little by little at each time. And kind of next year, maybe if he wants to add a little more aggressive touch with it, he can. But I think just gathering running backs in a slow stable like this is so important to having a natural core of it. Because, as much as I love a lot of parts of Justin's team that have high value, he has a ton of value at quarterback, a ton of value at tight end and wide receiver. he has nothing at running back. I think Dustin is doing a really good job of avoiding that by making a lot of these really good value picks of running back.
And the team is getting deep really fast. And of course, next year will be really impressive and of course, his roster cuts will be Alex Morales will be licking his chops the entire time leading up to next year's roster cuts. Sean, what do you think about Lloyd?
I mean, I feel like I already talked about it, but
yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's been a minute. Let's go to 210 then, and we'll wrap this up. So I picked Roman Wilson here at 210. Unfortunately, the board kind of didn't fall the way I wanted. I was hoping to get another running back lottery ticket here between Corum or Lloyd. I had both. I had Lloyd at 18 and Corum in a similar spot too at 17. So I thought I could get one of those guys potentially. And did not happen. So I was trying to trade out of 210 because I didn't really want to end up with two Steelers receivers because Wilson was the clear guy on my board that was left here from a talent perspective and just overall player perspective. The next up on my board ended up being Javon Baker, and he went 3-4 for me a little bit later. We'll talk about that on another episode, but I didn't really have a whole lot of options here. I think I feel like there was a pretty big drop off as well in this kind of range of the draft between the 18 and 19 for me, where we start talking about quarterbacks like Drake May, Jermaine Burton with some question marks. So I decided to go Wilson just as a talent play more than anything. And just maybe, and you got to believe the Steelers too. I mean, they have a great track record with receivers. Maybe there's two playable receivers again at some point in this offense, but I don't trust Arthur Smith as far as I can throw him at this point. So who knows? Maybe this is a complete waste of time, but it's a 210 pick, so you just got to kind of swing for the fence too.
I think it's a good pick. I think it's a fine pick. Do you have anything to add on this one, Sean?
I like Wilson a lot. He was a top 10 receiver pre-draft for me. Like, he's going to be a slot guy. So, but I mean, that's what they need. They have the outside guy, but I just don't know how much fantasy compared to real life football is going to be.
Yeah, I think he'll be one of those guys that you may have to kind of just start him in bye weeks and just hope. I don't think he'll be a guy that's a week one every week starter, like rely on guy. But before we leave, unless you guys have anything to add on Wilson,
Sure.
Let's maybe throw in a different spin on this top 20. What are some picks here that left other people destitute? Like, we all agree that Corum's not really going to affect Kyren Williams, but if it did, that'd be fucking huge for Sean. And if it ends up happening, are there any of these picks here that you see a guy and it's like, man, that's going to tank so-and-so's value in fantasy?
I think it's Rome for me. Like, I could see him walking in and being just the dude day one, and DJ Moore and Keenan Allen are wide receiver threes.
Wow. So if that happened in our league, I think that would be two starters down for those teams. I think Dan's cursed to start Keenan Allen, and I think, no, DJ Moore's not cursed to start on his team. That's not true. I think Tibbs has DJ Moore, does he not?
Tibbs, yeah.
Tibbs, right? Yeah. No, Tibbs is not really worried about DJ Moore. He's got plenty of wide receiver depth, but still, that's a good one. I think Rome is the one because he has Caleb, so he's got a pass catcher. If they're gonna go and wreck anyone's value, it's gonna be him. I can argue Ladd also wrecked Keenan Allen's value because they got rid of Keenan Allen and got Ladd. So I can argue that was an interdimensional fantasy value wrecking. I think Ladd also does, in a sense, devalue Quentin Johnson a little bit.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
I think he did that to himself, although they used him.
You've done that yourself.
They've been using him downfield when he's a get the ball in his hands and go kind of guy.
Yeah, he needed to be used like Rashee Rice was used, and they did not do that whatsoever.
Terrible usage. So we'll see. Like, Harbaugh's a smart guy, man. Like, on offense, they could figure that out. Like, Ladd can play anywhere, so they can move QJ inside, and they could be good. So, but the other guy is Lloyd for me, just because Jacobs was not inspiring last year.
I was just gonna say Marshawn Lloyd was the other one I was gonna bring up too.
I think any of those three running backs, Benson, Wright, or Lloyd. I mean, if things go the right way, all three of those starters might not get their jobs back, like for next year at least, at the very minimum.
I agree. I could see all three of them having no relevance, and I could see all three of them having extreme fantasy relevance and being worth a first round pick by this time next year.
Yeah, the
Um,
only reason I went with Lloyd over those guys is I think he could do it with play instead of injury. I think the other two would be injury just because those other guys are so locked into those offenses.
The other players are actually good in front of them. James
Yeah.
Conner, Mostert.
Yeah.
Whereas Jacobs, I think Jacobs is good, not great. But I think that he kind of feasted on just being able to run for a bad or a bad Vegas team that trusted him.
And he's a dude that plays with injuries, and those are the kind of guys that wear down really quick out of nowhere. So I just could see that one happening pretty easily.
I do think Brian Thomas, the Calvin Ridley thing, I think insulates it to a degree. But I do think over time, I think he will be the reason that guys like Evan Ingram and Kirk are replaced because we already got one guy and now we could slow roll collect the other two because now it's not an urgent problem because we're kind of solving it slowly as we go. But I don't think they're in any danger in the immediate. But I just think it helps for the long term Jags pass catching situation. Alec Pierce is already dead, so
Yeah,
you
pour one
mentioned
out
him a little bit.
for Jonathan Mingo too in Carolina because they
Oof.
drafted Leggett, who was basically Jonathan Mingo.
Well, Terrace Marshall's already dead
remember
and
Terrace
gone.
Marshall?
You know the meme of the girl in the pool and then the water underground is the skeleton? That's Terrace Marshall's the skeleton. The kid drowning is Mingo, and now Leggett's the girl getting caught for that meme. Carolina
Dude, they've had a rough go of receivers lately. It's been tough, and then another reason Leggett ended up lower on my board. I just can't. The track record's not there. It's tough.
It is, and I've gotten into the trap of it's going to turn around. It can't be bad forever. Surely they're going to draft a receiver that hits eventually, and it does turn around eventually, but it can always get worse. Never ever in pro sports underestimate how things could get worse. I think I heard this on the NFL radio. They were like, when the Panthers traded the pick last year, no one thought that pick would be 1-1. And if you did, you're a fucking liar. Like, I think we all thought it could be like 110, but I don't think anyone thought the Panthers were going to go from 1-9, getting a better quarterback, and we thought a refresh at coaching, and then immediately shit the bed. So I think the Panthers players all have a taint on them because of that stench. What follows the Commanders players too.
Yeah, Commanders. It's kind of in the same boat at this point. All right, so this is an hour and 22. We'll wrap it here because it's getting late for you all over there on the East Coast. So we'll wrap it up and then we'll try to do a little bit of rounds 3 through 7 Magic podcast. Maybe see if we can find the next Puka Nacua. Who knows? Guys, thanks for joining. This was a good podcast. I got a lot of really good discussions on these top 20 guys, and obviously these are kind of the difference makers. These top 20 premium picks. So. We'll see you next time on episode 65, where we'll talk about these guys. Maybe get some Dynabook lines going early with James, and just see if we can get things going. And then, of course, we have all off season to talk about team reviews. A lot of good stuff coming up here on the podcast. So thanks again.
First in receiving yards for rookies.
All right, you heard a Dynabook. Lock it in.
Give me the line, James.
He wants the line. All right, we'll send it out, and y'all have a good one.